Hi, everybody. I'm David Machiro, Product Marketing Manager for Retail and E-commerce at Tecsys. And today we have an in-conversation with Guy Courtin, our VP of Industry and Advanced Technology, to talk about digital transformation. Hi, Guy, and thanks for being here. We're seeing a lot of disruption in retail right now. Just a year ago, we had inventory shortages, and now we have inventory gluts. E-commerce seems to have plateaued. People are returning to the stores. We're seeing in the D2C market is in a period of transition. We're seeing manufacturer brands going direct. And one of the terms that never seems to leave the retail omni-channel lexicon is digital transformation. So, in the face of what's happening in retail today, how do you see digital transformation? What does it look like today? How did it look like yesterday? And what is it going to look like tomorrow?
Thanks, David. Absolutely. There's a lot to unpack there in what you just talked about. But let's start with the last statement you made around digital transformation. I think you're absolutely right. I think the term or the concept of digital transformation continues to permeate retail and business as a whole. And if we think about digital transformation, I go back to a date which was April 4th, 1994, and I'm going to date myself here. But for those of you who remember that date, that was the creation of this thing called Netscape, which really to me marks the beginning, if you will, of the internet as we know it today. Sort of the big digital transformation of this digital revolution. So what I think we're seeing is that this notion of digitization has really, since yes, it's been around since the late mid 90s, has really continued to permeate. Why? Because it's much like Bigfoot or the Yeti or the Bermuda Triangle. We've all heard of it. We all think we've seen it. We all think we know what it is, but no one really can put their finger on it. And I think that's the part that's really exciting, but also very challenging for today's modern retailer and direct-to-consumer brand is how do they work in this world? And everything you said, David, is absolutely right? We're seeing a lot of reactions right now to things that happen with COVID and et cetera, and other disruptions we've seen in our supply chain. But the reality is that the digital transformation, the digital aspect of retail and of the business we live in is the underlying theme that really we all need to think about and determine how do we manage that? How do we change the way we do business based on this new world of being incredibly digital, being really fully digital, being totally digital?
So one of the areas of digital transformation we've seen here at Tecsys is from a omni-channel or unified commerce. There's a lot of terms going around. From changing your website, changing your e-commerce platforms, everything going from omni-channel to store experiences. So, in terms of the omni-channel experience and in terms of the retail experience, is there an aspect of digital transformation that you think people might be overlooking or not associate to what's happening with omnichannel retail and really satisfying the customer's need for a seamless experience?
Absolutely, David. And I think what you just mentioned there, I think is really at the crux to some degree of what we're seeing in the space. What I mean by that is when we think digital and we think digital for retail or digital for direct to consumer or digital for us, the consumer, the first thing that comes to mind is e-commerce. It's the website, right? It's this URL that we'll go visit to go find a product or go find where a store is or go find information about a retailer or a brand or what have you. And I mentioned earlier, sort of Netscape, and what I think the audience should think about is if we go back sort of in our time machine and go back to the beginning of this digital revolution, and we look at things as Netscape and such. And I remember, back in the late 90s, early 2000s, having a website was still something that was very foreign to a lot of businesses, regardless of B2C or B2B. We fast forward to today, and having a website is table stakes. I mean, it's we don't even think about it. I go to here in Vermont, I go to a local chili shop that's a little stand, and I assume they have a website with their menu on it and their hours, and maybe even I can buy product through their website. So the website itself, as you mentioned, the e-commerce side, this digital portal to transact or to communicate or to interact with the retailer and the brand, we just take as table stakes. We assume you will have that just as much as you would have inventory or people answering phones, things of that nature in the past. But what people have maybe disregarded or not paid as much attention to, or not focused on as much when it comes to the digital revolution or digital evolution, if you will, is what happens sort of below that waterline. So I'm going to use a horrible analogy or cliche, which is, the iceberg, right? And the tip of the iceberg is maybe your website or your ECP, right? That URL that customers are going to come to. Everything below that digital waterline, or everything on that digital iceberg below the waterline, are things such as your supply chain, order management, clienteling, things of that nature, right? A lot of pieces that go into the puzzle to allow you to satisfy your customer's needs wherever she is, however she wants to interact. But there's a lot of different pieces below that waterline that are themselves becoming more digital, that are themselves having to be sort of pulled into the digital revolution that we, to some degree, the general public is, I don't want to say ignorant of, but is not really paying attention to. And to some degree, retailers themselves haven't really paid as much attention to as they have to their website. So I think that's the exciting part, or the challenge we're seeing today, is that everything below that waterline really is ripe for a continued evolution, a continued digitization, if you will. And I think that's the part that we're going to see retailers who take, a strong look at that are going to really gain, as opposed to their peers that are just focusing on that above the waterline website perspective when it comes to digitization.
I think what happens in the world of retail is that you have there's an emphasis or importance placed on the storefront, the online storefront, but maybe less of an emphasis or importance put on what's actually running behind and how does that impact the customer. So can you speak to a little about what kind of systems are maybe not center stage that you might not even be able to see, but are there and really actually drive this omni-channel experience, but you can't see them like a fancy storefront with personalization, and cards and all that kind of stuff. But what's really going on in the background?
Absolutely, David. And I think as we talked, or as I mentioned, the last question, talking about what's below that waterline, I think you're absolutely right. And I think one of the things that we're seeing, and maybe we sort of position it into two buckets, right? One is the digital orchestration of your processes, if you will, and the other one is the how you take digital and apply it to the physical aspect of actually doing fulfillment, right? So I think those are some of the things that consumers, the general public, is not as aware of as they are with that URL or the website. Now, having said that, maybe it's becoming a little bit more mainstream. I mean, we've just come through 2+ years of COVID, where the term supply chain, the term fulfillment, has become top of full discussion. So maybe we're seeing a little bit more awareness of this. But you're absolutely right. From the perspective of retailers and brands, and we as consumers, we have to, or we should be becoming more aware of how digital is starting to impact those other pieces, if you will, of the puzzle. So, for example, like order management, right? What is this, or what is the tool that can help you orchestrate, have visibility to your inventory, understand how to do the orchestration of orders, where to pick them from, where to deliver them to, things of that nature. I think we're going to see more and more of digital impact in that space. If we look at things like the warehouse or transportation, right, the physical side of actually moving the boxes, we're already seeing a lot more digitization starting to play in those areas where, maybe 10, 15, 20 years ago, we didn't think of it as much, right? We didn't think of a digital revolution happening in a warehouse, right? We just felt like, well, a warehouse is, you're just moving boxes, you're storing boxes, you're picking, packing, and moving them out. But now we're seeing the digital aspect starting to permeate in that space as well. So again, I think it's a challenge, but I think there's a lot of opportunity out there for retailers and brands to start looking at what is below that waterline, so to speak, and what are the features and the functions that they have to deal with on a daily basis to get their business operating, to satisfy their customer, and how can digital help enhance that? How can digital make that better? How can digital even potentially change some of the ways they do things, whether it's order management, whether it's for the warehouse management? And I think that's a really exciting space.
For retailers today that are looking to kind of change that below the waterline piece of the iceberg, and essentially transform the fulfillment side of their business, what can you tell them to kind of alleviate any type of apprehension or fears they might have, in implementing, for example, an order management system to go with their e-commerce platform?
Absolutely, David. I think this is. I'm going to date myself again and go back to when we started this digital revolution, sort of the late '90s. And I remember, I was working at Forrester Research at the time, and I mentioned this earlier. But today we just assume websites that we all, every retailer, brand, mom and pop store has some form of website. Well, not too long ago, right when I was at Forrester in the late '90s, we were still working with some very large brands and retailers and trying to convince them why they needed a website. So the reason I bring this up is we are the same situation in a way with some of these digital technologies below the waterline, which is, yes, they might have some legacy solutions. They might have leaning on their ERP solution, maybe their ECP to do some of these functions. But what I would tell them is the same thing that we would tell these retailers and brands in the late '90s is, you don't have time to sort of wait and to see how the market will play out here. This is becoming more and more table stakes. You need these digital tools to be able to not just keep up with your competitor, but to survive in this environment. Because again, things are moving so quickly. You just mentioned in the beginning of this, that we are seeing a glut in inventory, then we're seeing a drop in inventory. It just shows that the pace at which disruption and change is happening is the only constant that we're seeing out there. And that these digital tools, whether it's order management or a more digitized tool around your warehouse, your transportation, these are the types of tools that allow you to just keep up. And then as you build on that, you can now find new competitive advantages. You can find new use cases, things of that nature to get ahead. But if you don't have that strong foundation, then how can you expect to keep up with the market the way it is? So my advice is really, there's no time to delay. This is not a nice to have. This is a need to have. Now, it doesn't mean that people should rush out and just grab anything off the shelf. I think you do have to spend time with your service provider, with your strategic partners, and understand what is it exactly you're looking to accomplish, and what digital tools are out there for you to be able to accomplish those things. Not just today, but what prepares you for tomorrow. And again, like I said, this reminds me back in the late '90s when, some very large companies were still wondering, well, do I really need a website? Like, why do I need this? I think we're sort of in a similar phase today where, companies I think have said, well, we've taken care of our website and our ECP. So what else is there from a digital perspective? And I would say you've just begun the journey. You've taken the first step, which is great and necessary. But the journey is a long one, and it's one that's very, will become very prosperous for you, but you better start on it sooner rather than later.
To kind of close it all off, what kind of investment in time, or what kind of investment in resources, would it take to kind of get, basically take you from a legacy fulfillment system and a legacy model to basically a current, up-to-date, unified commerce, a real omni-channel customer experience?
Like I said, David, it's a journey, right? And I think what we need to do is to be honest with ourselves to say that there is no simple solution to this. There's no silver bullet. But B, because it is a journey, that it's going to take time. Now, having said that, I don't think we're looking at years to get there. I think we're looking at months, and certain parts of that journey can be accomplished much quicker or in a much more rapid fashion than others. And you want to continue or continuously iterate as you're on that journey. So for me, and for anyone, folks listening to this, I would say the advice is, if you need to start on that journey, you need to have a time horizon that is doable, meaning, look at months and, longer for your greater digital transformation. But you can certainly take pieces of this digital journey that are important, like, again, order management, things of that nature, and realize that you can find or gain benefits from it within months of putting in or in the process of installing a system that will allow you to do that. But again, the only caution I have is waiting is not going to make things go faster. What I mean by that is if you're just waiting to see what has happened in the market and where you should go, it's going to be too late once you start. So I think the important part is to start, and then from a timing perspective, have reasonable time horizons, but realize that we're going to measure this in terms of months and not years, and certainly not decades. So from that perspective, I think the timing from that perspective, technologies and things have become so much more advanced than they were 20, 30 years ago that they can all, or we can all, find benefit from them, again, in a much tighter time frame than we might have in the past.
Thanks, Guy, for those great insights. I think the message is loud and clear. For retailers is basically, get started today. There's never going to be a perfect time, and take the benefits as you start to grow into your new systems. Thanks for watching.